We'll start now. This is the Sikha in Chelik Yud Ches, Parshas Bamidbar, the first Sikha of the Parsha. And the Rebbe quotes the Pasuk. It says, I'll read it inside, but before I mention the Pasuk, I want to say that before this Pasuk, the Torah talks about what the Leviim, Shevet Levi, is supposed to do. The job of Shevet Levi. After it says the job of Shevet Levi, then comes this pasuk that we're going to talk about. And after this pasuk, Torah again goes back to the Leviim, Shevet Levi. So the pasuk says like this: in pasuk, "Ves Aaron ves bonav tifkeit," that Aaron and his children you shall appoint. V'shomru es kunosam. The words are important. Every word is important. And they shall guard or watch their kahuna, their priesthood. V'hazor hakorev yumet. A zor, a non-kayan, who will get close, he will die. Now, what does the pasuk mean? That they shall watch their kahuna. Is Rashi Mafaris the vector of Shomras Konosam? So Rashi explains that what is the meaning of the words they shall watch their kahuna? That means Kabbalah Domim, receiving of the blood, Uzrike, and the spritzing of the blood, sprinkling of the blood, Ba'aktora, and being makriv on the Mizbeach, but Avedas Amsuras the Kehanim, and the Avedas which are given over to the Kehanim. So that means Rashi learns as Kohonosim made the Avedas from the Kehanim. That the word Kohonosim here means what the Kehanim do. In other words, Kohonosim, as we'll see later on, the Even Ezra says a different shot. Even Ezra says Kohonosim means to watch their kahuna. They should make sure they don't ruin their kahuna, they don't become tummy, etc., etc. But Rashi doesn't learn like that. Rashi says they should watch their kahuna means their aveda, the services that the kohanim do. They should watch it. And the pasuk says, which are the services that the kohanim do? What's the aveda of the kohanim? Kabbalah's domim. We know that the main aveda is when they shech the korban, you have to receive the blood in a keilah. And the other thing is rike. Then you take the blood and you sprinkle it. And then you take certain daimer in certain parts and you makter it and you bring it on the mizbeach. So Rashi says that the word konosim here means these avedas, and then Rashi adds the words after he gives the example of these three: receiving the blood, sprinkling the blood, and being makter on the mizbeach. He adds and the avedas of the kayanim. That means that's what konosim means, and therefore when we shomras konosim, what does the Torah mean when it says you shall watch your kuna? You shall watch these avedas, meaning there's only their laws and azor to turn any from the avedas. Do not allow a zor, which means a non-kayan, to do any of the avedas. And that's the end of the pasuk. Of azor hakorev yumas, that a zor will get close, will die. So Rashi learns the way it seems simple pshat in Rashi, that when the pasuk says you shall appoint on to do what? To watch their avedas, that the avedas that they do, they should watch it to make sure that no zor, no non-kayan does their avedas. That Even Ezra Bertayt for Shomros Kanosim, the Even Ezra says a different pshat. The Shomras Kanosim means they should watch the kuna that they should not become posel. They should watch their kuna. Das heißt, that means the kenim darfen sich hiten their kuna. They have to watch themselves. They have to watch their kuna as they soll nicht werden posel kuna. They shouldn't become posel to kuna durch tumme, becoming tumme. So it doesn't mean the kuna doesn't mean the avedas of the kehanim. It means they should watch the fact that they are kehanim, and their kehan should not become posel. They shouldn't become tumme. Daarvan verstehen, so the Rebbe says we have to understand, from wann nimmt Rashi zu teichen the word konosom, where does Rashi get this? To explain, to translate the word konosom, nit kipshuti, he explains it not the way it's the simple meaning, di kahuna alein, kipirish Even Ezra, seems like the simple words mean you should watch your kahuna. That never says. Rashi says, no, that's not the pshat, nor avedes amsuras lakenim. It's not watching the kahuna, it's watching the aveda that the kayanim do. What makes Rashi say that? Why doesn't Rashi teach kipshute? Simple pshat. Watch the kuna. You're a kayan. Watch yourself. That you should be a good kayan. You should be a proper kayan. Don't do things that will make you puzzle. We can't say as Rashi's hechrech is from the Msiyim HaPosi, the Azara Kor of Yumas. You can't say that. In other words, possibly you would say that where does Rashi get this? Because the end of the posik says Azara Kor of Yumas was read wegen Azor was tut eine von der Avedes HaKayanim, and that is talking about if a non-Kayan does one of the Avedas HaKayanim. So the end of the pasuk is talking about their Aveda. What do you mean Azor? A stranger, a non-Kayan who gets close will die. Get close to what? That if he'll do the Avedas of the Kayanim. Und der Fun ist muchrech, as eichen as kolas akosov, that's wegen Avedas HaKayanim. So you would think that forces Rashi to say that because the end of the pasuk is talking about the Avedas, when it says the non-Kayan should not get close, meaning to do the Avedas, so Rashi learns, but Mela, the beginning of the pasuk where it says they should watch their kahuna also means not to watch the kahuna, but to watch the Avedas of the Kayanim. So the Rebbe says you can't say that shot. Well, if that would be the hechach, what forces Rashi to say that kunosa means the Avedas from the end of the pasuk, but Rashi in sein Dibur HaMasch Almighty given die Werte von Siyum HaPosik. So Rashi in his Dibur HaMasch, in his heading, would have quoted also the end of the pasuk. Oder Meram is given durch ein Wort Vegamer, or at least he would hint it to the word Vegamer, which means and continue the pasuk. We know Rabbi Shita is that Rashi brings in the heading of the pasuk, quotes those words which is negeya to the pirush he is saying. If Rashi's pirush, that this means the Aveda, and not the kahuna itself, is from the last three words of Azara Korv Yumas, he should have quoted that, or at least hinted to it. Begamer, look further. Und the time for was it talking, it can hechler from the Sima Posik. But why talk is okay, so we have a raya that Rasha, that's not Rasha's hechler, Rasha's proof that that's what it means. Why talking not? So the reason is Porsche, simple. Weil wir können nicht sagen, dass Agora Korv Yumas nicht kein Hemsche, weil wir können sagen, dass Azara Korv Yumas ist nicht kein Hemsche, Chainja von Shomras Konosim. What's that zweite Linie? Who says that the words Azara Korv Yumas is a continuation to what it says before V'Shomrut Kanosa? Maybe it's two separate things. It says V'Shomrut Kanosa means they should watch the Kuna. And then it says another thing. A stranger should not get close. And if he gets close, he will die. So you can't say because the end of the Pasuk is talking about the Avedas, that means that the beginning of the Pasuk, first part of the Pasuk is also talking about Avedas. There could be two separate inyonim. So the discussion that we asked is what forces Rashi to say that when the pasuk says the Shomros Kanosa means to watch the Avedas of the Kayanim and not like the simple pshat that we have. And as it says to watch their own kahuna. We also have to understand for what is Rashi writing in the Dibur HaMaschal die Werte v'Shomro es. Why does Rashi quote in the heading also the words v'Shomro es? He says he quotes the words v'Shomru es kahunosam, and then he explains what kahunosa means. It doesn't sound enough to mighty sein nur dem Wort, welches is befarish kenosa. Basically, what Rashi is doing, he's telling when the pasuk says the Shomrot Kenosa, watch the kahuna. What does it mean, kahuna? The word V'Shomru, Rashi is not explaining. V'Shomru, we know what it means. Watch it. Rashi is just explaining what the word kahunosa means, and it means the Avedas, these three Avedas he mentions, and the rest of the Avedas of the Kayanim. That's what kenosa means. So you should have quoted kahunosam and say what he says. Why does he also quote the word V'Shomru? The two words, V'Shomru es. The Rebbe continues. When you learn this Rashi, it seems first glance, as Kabbalas Domim, Uzrike v'Aktores eine Dugmoyes Protis von der Avedas HaMasiras L'Kayanim. The way you learn simple pshat, when Rashi gives three examples of the Aveda of the Kayanim, receiving the blood, sprinkling the blood, and sacrificing, bringing it on the Mizbeach. And then Rashi adds the words, and the Avedas given over to the Kayanim. So normally you assume that Rashi is quoting three examples of Avedas of the Kayanim. So really, what Rashi is telling us that it says the Shomros Kanosa means to watch the Avedas, and Rashi gives example of some Avedas of the Kayanim. But the Rebbe asks, if we're going to learn that way, is not movement is not understood like this. Number one, the Arichis in Rashi. Why does he go in such length? Meaning to say like this. First of all, so the boss darf Rashi bechol bringen the Mois. If Rashi, these are three examples of the general concept of Avedas of Kayanim. Why do you need examples for? Or the Kitab Zogen Bekitzer Avedas of Masiras Kayanim. He should have said Kohanosam. What's Kohanosam? The Avedas that are given over to the Kayanim. And the second thing, Eipsul Shelo Zain the Avedas for Far Kabbalas Domim. But maybe Rashi mentions these for a special reason. Maybe the reason is because he wants to say the Kayanim did a lot of things. They shechted the korban. But that's not an Aveda that's given over to the Kayanim because they're even a non-Kayan could check. So maybe Rashi wants to tell us which Avedas are we talking about that they have to watch, that no one else should do it, starts from the Kabbalas Domim, from the receiving of the blood. Maybe that's the reason why Rashi gives the examples, to tell us that only from that point and on are called Avedas HaMasuras L'Kayanim, but anything the Kayanim did before is not. But if that's what Rashi means, Rashi didn't have to give 3 examples. He should have just said the words from Kabbalah, from receiving of the blood, and further, and anything that went further is the Avedis given over to the Kohanim. This is the way that Rashi says it in a different place. But Yikra Rashi says that. So why would he have to give the examples if he's trying to tell us that only from that point on? And another thing, if Rashi for some reason has to give examples, why give the 3 examples? Why not 2, 1? Why do you have to do that? So basically, the first shaila is, why does Rashi go into so many details, so many ariches? The second shaila is, the state in Rashi, the way Rashi, the order of Rashi. The first Rashi gives examples. Simple pshat is these are examples of the Avedas given to the Kohanim. So first Rashi writes the examples, and then he says, and the Avedas given over to the Kohanim. But he says, verkehrt to say that. Should have been the opposite. Frier Avedas Amsuras Kohanim. First he should have said, what does the Kohanosah mean that they have to watch? They have to guard. The Avedas given over to the Kohanim, which is their klal. That's the rule. And then the protim, then the details. If he wants to give examples, you give it afterwards. So first they should have said what it means is the Avedas of the Kohanim, and then if he wants to give examples, he should give examples later. Why does he start off with examples and then he says that? The main question is, since these 3, Kabbalah, the Zrike, Aktorah, are all from the Avedas given over to the Kohanim, Rashi should have not said these 3 Kabbalahs, Domim, Zrike, Aktorah, and Avedas given over to the Kohanim. He should have said, and the other Avedas. These are also part of the Avedas of the Kohanim. He said, the Shar and the rest. From them is moving, from all that we understand. As Rashi means to sagen, as B'shomros Kenosim is Keilot Tzveis Tugim. Since Rashi says first these 3, and then he says, and Avedas given over to the Kohanim, he's talking about 2 types, 2 categories. Number 1, Kabbalah's Domim was Zrike V'Aktorah. The Pasuk says they should watch their Kohuna, means number 1, these 3 things. They have to watch these 3 things. And these 3 are Avedas that are not Mesuras Kohanim. These are Avedas which for some reason are not called given over to the Kohanim, which means really they are. The Kohanim have to do it, nobody else. But Rashi is like hinting that these are Avedas that are not given over to the Kohanim. And the Pasuk is telling you, you got to watch these Avedas that no one else should do it. And the second thing, which means a second category, Avedas Mesuras Kohanim. Another category that they have to watch is the Avedas given over to the Kohanim. But if we're going to learn like that Rashi is telling us 2 things, and the first things are not Avedas given to the Kohanim, it's not understood. Rashi said in the beginning of Parashat Vayikra, Mekabala ve'elech mitzvahs kohuna, from the receiving of the blood, that's a mitzvah for the Kohanim. We just said before, it must be that Rashi is telling us that these are not Aved of the Kohanim. That's why Rashi writes it separately, and then he says Avedas of the Kohanim. But how could you say they're not Avedas of the Kohanim? Rashi says clearly, from Kabbalah's Adam is the Aved of the Kohanim. Bay is the second thing. Even if we're going to find some explanation why these 3 things are not called Avedas and Mesuras L'Kohanim, is mit movement still not understood. From wann nimmt Rashi die Chochas B'shomros Kenosim meint Echazel Avedas and nicht Mesuras L'Kohanim. If a takid is not Avedas and Mesuras L'Kohanim, so how does Rashi takid know that this is what the pasuk means? The pasuk says V'shomru es kunosom. They should keep, watch, protect, or whatever their kahuna. And Rashi says, according to this last thing that we're saying, and Rashi says, what does it mean to watch their kahuna? Things which are not given over to Kohanim, these 3, and also things that are given over to Kohanim. If these are not given over to the Kohanim, how does it fit to B'shomros Kenosim? Why does Rashi say when it says watch the kahuna includes these 3 things, if these 3 things are not part of the Aved of the Kohanim for some reason, even if you'll find some reason? So the Rebbe said the beer is like this. Explanation. So basically, just to repeat in short, one shaila was, why does Rashi learn that B'shomros Kenosim means they should watch their Avedas? Why does he learn Kipshita? Watch the Kuna, like the Rebbe says, watch themselves, that they shouldn't become puzzled. Another shaila is, what are the 2 things? Kabbalah's Domim, Zrike, Naktorah, and Aveda Mesuras L'Kohanim. From the way the Rebbe is Machriach, they're 2 separate things, which means there are Avedas given to the Kohanim. The first 3, the Kabbalah and Zrike, Aktorah, are not given over to the Kohanim. So first of all, what does that mean? It's not given over to the Kohanim. But that's what it seems from Rashi. That it's not, because it says later, not the rest of the Avedas. And the Avedas were given to the Kohanim. So the Shaila, what does that mean? And second of all, if a Take is not Aveda of the Kohanim, how does Rasha say that that's what the Pasuk means, the Shomer is Kanos, to watch the Kahuna, something that's not an Aveda of the Kohanim? Seems made a kasha, very strong kashas. When you learn these kashas, you start thinking, I can't figure out how the Rebbe would find an answer to this kasha. It's a very simple kasha. The beer in them explanations like this. The hechrach to learn as a Shomer is Kanos, make me that's a Makuna Kipirish Even Ezra, and the Aveda some serious Kohanim. First, the Rebbe said, I'm going to explain what forced Rasha to say that when it says they should watch the kahuna, doesn't mean watch themselves, that their kahuna should be okay. It means watching somebody else, that no one else should do their aveda. What forced Rashi to say? So he says like this. This posik is coming to tell us something new. A new means a new appointment, a new job that's given to the kohanim that we didn't learn before. The Rashi says here on the word tifked, which it says, it doesn't mean to count, because sometimes tifked in the parsha Bamidbar means to count. Here it means to appoint. It's a new appointment, a new job given to them. So what is the pasuk saying? Should appoint Aaron and his children to do what? To Shomros Konosa. A new job I'm giving you. Please, could you mute yourselves? Could everyone mute themselves? So the pasuk says, I'm giving the Aaron and his children a new job, that they should watch the kahuna. If this pasuk means that now he's telling them, the Shomros Kanosim, they should watch themselves, their own kahuna, they shouldn't become puzzle in their kahuna, he says, that's not a new job. If them organization longer is geworden in Parsha Zemer, in Parsha Zemer they were told already that they have to be careful not to become toiber and similar. So why would the pasuk say, I'm giving you a new job, they should watch the kahuna? The Rebbe learned, Rasha learns at the Tafkid Chodesh Bashtoido, that Rasha learns that the new job is something else. What is the new job? Was a darfen heat as Azor is only ton Avedis some service of Kohanim. So must be that what he needs to say is that a non-Kohen should not do the Avedis of the Kohanim. The Shomru, the gamer, Azor HaKodesh, you must read, wegen ein und demselben Minui. The pasuk says, I'll read the pasuk again. V'sarim is born of Tifkid. You should appoint Aaron and his children. The Shomru, Eskonosam, V'Azor HaKodesh, they go together. They should watch the Kohanim, meaning they should watch that the Aveda of the Kohanim, no one else should do it. No Zor should do it. And it goes together. It's all together. It's all one union. But we have to say that, because we can't say they should watch their Kohanim. That's not a new job, which pasuk is saying, I'm giving him a new job. The meat is moving for Vasrasha is mighty in the Dibra Maschalei the Verte V'Shomru Es. This explains why one of the kashas was, if Rashi is just explaining what Es Konosa means, he should have quoted just the word Konosa and explain what it means. Why does he quote also in the Dibra Maschal the word V'Shomru? Now we know why. But because the word V'Shomru is telling him what to do. They shall watch. That's like explaining that I'm telling him something now what they have to do. While the Echochav sein Pirush is from them was the Posik Zog Danayim Tafkid Aaron Vonav. The raya that Rashi has, that this is what it means, because he's telling him something new to do. I'm appointing you to do something that I didn't tell you before. Now, which words say that he's telling him to do something? The words V'Shomru. It says they shall watch. So I'm telling you something to do, and it comes by Hemshech to Tifkei. So it's a new job telling him to do. That's the proof. Not like that's not in Pshat. That's not like the Even Ezra that he's telling to watch themselves, because that we learned that's not a new job. So when he's telling him V'Shomru, you shall do something, and it's a new job, must mean that he's telling him to watch, that nobody else, no Zor should do it. And the Konosa means the Aveda of the Kohanim, that they should watch the Aveda of the Kohanim, no one else should do it. Then Rashi also is answering another question that one might have in the pasuk. Sei de frier die Psukim, or sei de weiter die Psukim. The Psukim before this pasuk, and the Psukim after this pasuk. Reden wegen the Levim. Talks about the Levim. They Aveda, what the job was, minyan, counting them, etc., etc. Is the question is, wie passt rein in mitten that Tzivu Yemin Tzadin Avon of Kohanim V'Shomros Kanosim? If the Eibush is telling the Kohanim something to do, why would he give him tell about the job in between talking about the Levim? He's talking about the Levim before, he's talking about the Levim after. And in the middle, he put in the senior that the Kohanim have to watch the Kohanim. There are from them meanable Chure Gedarf Zayin Frier. Where would this have been? Should have been written that he's giving him this new job to watch the kuna. Should have been written before. With the Torah zokt Eilish Meis Ben An Nakayanim Amshuchim Hashemid Yodam Lakayan says before a posik that these are the names of the children of Adam the Kayanim, which were anointed, etc. So he will tell them this is the names of the Kayanim and say what he's telling him to do, or the Kayetzebe or something else. Why put it in middle of the middle when he's describing what the Levim have to do? For them we understand that from them was Malen free reng the Aveda from the Levim must be like this. And there does a lot of times he doesn't give the answer right away. He gives a general outlook and then he explains the details. So it must be the pshat like this, that because what we learned before concerning the Levim, Voltman gekent aruisdringen, we could have thought, come with the conclusion, as Azor Megieton gewiss Avedes in Mishkan Migdash. Because we're talking about the Levim, and if you look back what it says concerning the Levim, you might come to a conclusion, yes, certain Avedes of the Kayanim they could do. And the Rebbe, the Teire, gleich get up and the side of his body of Tifkid gave me. That's why right away, as soon as he spoke about the Levim, and the Avim have a certain Aved, and the Torah says something, and we'll see in a moment what it is. The Torah says something about the Levim, which would make us think that the Levim could do certain Avedas of the Kayanim. So right away, as soon as he starts talking about the Levim, he says, I want to tell you, after I'm telling you something, don't make a mistake from that. The Levim could do the Aveda. The Kayanim have a job to watch that you shouldn't do the Aveda. The Beer and them to explain what is it that we said before that might make a person think that there are certain things the Levim could do. If there was state free as the Levim are hitten mishmeres b'nei Yisrael, before it says one of the things that the Levim have to guard, the guarding we call it of the bnei Yisrael of all the Eden. What do you mean the guarding of all the Eden or the job of all the Eden? So this is what Rasha says. It's Rasha Mefarish. Rasha says Shekulo no yiskukim l'tzorchei Hamikdash. Be'emes, all the Eden should have been involved in serving in the Beis Hamikdash. Ela shalavim bom tachteim b'shlichusam. The fact that the Levim do certain avedas, they are shluchim from the Eden. So really, it's the job of all the Eden. It's not the pshat, there's the job of the Levim. And the Bnei Yisrael, the others don't have that job. Everyone is obligated. But the Eibishter said, the Levim will do it for them. The Levim are shluchim from all Eden, l'tzorchei Hamikdash. Now since the Rasha said the Pesukim mean that the Levim are shluchim of all the Eden to do the service in the Mishkan, the Mikdash, and I would think, I would think that certain Avedas which we find that the Yidden, not the Kayanim did, we find before they did Avedas similar to the Beis Hamikdash, Megen Zeh, or the Darfle Zeh, noch an Akomas HaMishkan geton werden durch the Levim, tachtei b'shluchusam. If there are certain things that the Yidden did, as far as the Korbanos are concerned, so I would think that now when we have a Beis Hamikdash and these Avedas have to be done, so I would think that the Yidden could do it. Now, to say that all the Yidden could do it, I wouldn't say, because the Eibishter made the Levim to be instead of the Yidden. But that could, at least the Levim should be able to do it. So I would assume, since these are things that all the Yidden did, and the Levim now are shluchim of all the Yidden, so they were able to do these things. And we don't know yet what it is, but we'll see in a second. This is the reason why he says like this. What does it mean, Mishomras Konosam? Kabbalas domim, uzriki vaktore. Receiving the blood, sprinkling the blood, and being makter, being makriv. While by the Avedas gitmint ben as alle Eden haben frier getan. Look how Sivov later in Sivov we'll see that we find these three Avedas were Avedas that all the Eden did before. And the Rebbe will gonna have him in it. I would think as Easter tun as the Levim tachtei b'shluchusam. So now the Levim could do it for the Eden. Since the Levim are the shluchim of the Eden, and this is Aveda that Shaykhs to all the Eden, so the Levim should do it. The far verdo, therefore here, in middle when he talks about the Levim, right away he warns and he says, they have to care him, have to watch. These Avedas should not be done by anybody else. And anybody else here, he means Bemes the Levim. Now he means the Yisrael, Avade. But by the Yisrael, we wouldn't think that they should do it because there are Shluchim of there, so the Levim. But it means no Levi should do these Avedas. And I would think, because if not for this Pasuk, I would think that the Levim could. So as soon as he says about the Levim, he has to tell us this. But then the question is, if it's only these three, as we'll see that the Eden did, why does Rashi also mention this includes all Avedas, Hamasuras, Lakeanim? These are the other things the Levim, the Bnei Yisrael didn't do. But deswegen is Rashi nicht mistapik mit dem. Rashi is not satisfied just by saying these three. When he's Meisiv dem Zweiten, so he quotes another category. He says, and besides these three, because these three cannot be called Avedas given over to the Kehanim. Why can't we call it? One of the questions before was, how could you say these three are not given to the Kohanim? Rashi said the Kohanim have to do it. What we mean here, not given over to the Kohanim, because the Yidden also did it. It's not exclusively for Kohanim. So, but why does Rashi add also the Avedas given over to the Kohanim? But those are the Avedas are lechatchila gegeben according to Kohanim. These are lechatchila only for Kohanim. For these things, we never think that the others could do it. So why does Rashi mention it here? Hagam says, I wouldn't even think of the non-Kohen, which means a Levi in this case, could do it. Why does Rashi Taka bring that to? Since here is the place where the Posik has to tell us that they should watch themselves, they should watch their Aveda, meaning these three Avedas, because you would have thought that others could do it too. He's moving. We understand that the Azhar of Shomretz Kenosim is scale of a Chalaf al Avedas. And the reason why it says it here is because of these three. Because I would think the Levim could do it. But if he's telling us already that the Kohanim have to watch, that nobody else should do it, this also includes this. This includes also those that are given out the Kohanim. These are Vedas which the other Yisrael had a shaykhs. Only the Kohanim could do Vedas which the Chatchila Avade. But why does Rashi mention it? Because since he's mentioning that the Posik is telling us that they have to make sure that no Zor does these Avedas, so he mentions that also. Because the Pale, it's included. But the reason why it's here in middle of talking about the Levim is because of these three. But now the question comes up, where do we find? We said that Bnei Yisrael did these three Avedas. Where do we find it? But the far can sein havemin as ik had echitz to the Bnei Yisrael, heine to the Levim Shulchusam. That we said that there should be, we would think, because they have all the Eden did this of these three Avedas, I would think that they are shaykhs to it. The Bemela, the Levim, who are their shluchim could do it. Where do we find it? He says, Mefurish in Pshuta Shel Mikra. We find it in the Posik. Rashi doesn't even have to bring it. In the Orah 17, the Rebbe says, Shalochen ain't tzorech Rashi lefarshe. Rashi doesn't have to explain why dafka these three. Where do we find it? It's a story in the Torah. For sure, it's someone to learn that will remember. Rashi doesn't have to say it. Where is it? In Parshas Bay. Am Korban Pesach. In Mitzrayim. In Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim, we given that Tzivui by the Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim. There was a commandment. The Lokchum in Adam should take the blood from the Korban Pesach. The Nosno al Shtei HaMezuzah, he put on the two doorposts. Ba'ochles HaBoser gave mitzliyesh, and they should eat the meat roasted. Al Krov, Al Kirbet, the feet and the inside should all be roasted. Zetman do as Yidden am geton drei Sachen. Here we see, in simple pshat, three things the Yidden did. Actually, the Rebbe in Orah 18 star says, in Derech HaHalocha, we also say that in Gemara that these are the three things. Number one, V'lochles Hadam, you should take the blood. What is that? Dos meint virashem harash kabbalas Hadam. That means they should receive the blood, which is the same as by regular kabbalas when you receive the blood. Aveda, the first Aveda that Rashi mentions. The second thing it says v'nosnei, you should put it on the doorpost. V'mokim Aveda sazrike. That's like spritzing. And the mizbeach is spritzed. This was on the doorpost. It's like a mizbeach, and they spritzed it. And then the pasuk says sliesh. You should either roast it. Ken Aveda saktora. If neisham mizbeach, just like the kabbalas, you put that on the fire and the mizbeach. Here they have to put it on the fire to roast it. So we see that the Eibush they're allowed Stam Yidden also to do these three Avedas. But the River, well, you can't mean it, so we would have be able to think, as Eich va Pesach Deires, was his gleich to Pesach Mitzrayim, even by the later Korban Pesach, not the one that they did in Mitzrayim, but their far length up Kama halachas by Pesach Deires and Pesach Mitzrayim. A lot of halachas that we learn out how to do the Korban Pesach all the years later from the way they did the Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim. Rashi brings it, and if Rashi brings it, it means it's Pshuta Shel Mikra. So in Pshuta Shel Mikra, we have a right to compare what to do by the other Korban Pesachs from the Pesach Mitzrayim. So if by Pesach Mitzrayim the Yidden did these three Avedas, from the Avedas HaShayches to Yidden, and the Levim too, and the Startleim B'Shluchusam, so obviously I chose that they have a Shayches these three Avedas. So therefore the Levim who are in their place will be able to do it. That's why the Eibishter had to say right away, as soon as he talked about the Levim, he right away said, V'shobru es konosam, that they should watch and what does that mean? Mainly, why is he saying it? Kabbalas domim, ozrike v'aktora. These three, canal like his name before. Then he adds also the other things also, because if it's already saying it, he's saying it everything, which certainly you can't have a Zor do because they have no shaykhs to begin with. But he's trying to tell you that these three, now, but why would we even think that these three? Because these three the Yidden did. So it comes out according to this, Rasha Taka says two categories. When Rasha says Shomas Konosa means to wash from the Aveda. So first, mainly the point is the Avedas that Shaykh is not only to Kayanim, Aveda Shaykh is to all the Yidden. That's not called Aveda Samsuras L'Kayanim, not given to the Kayanim. Shaykh is to all the Yidden. And then also it's Kayla. The second thing, Aveda Samsuras L'Kayanim. And it's not that he's giving examples. In Poshup Pshat, you would think that Rashi gives three examples of Aveda Samsuras L'Kayanim, but they never proved that can be. From the Loshen, from Mele, so what he means is, Dafka these three, because these would be a Havim because they're not Masuras L'Kayanim. See, it's Kashan in the Rebbe says, no, you can't ask. How could you even think, how could we even think that these Avedas could be done through Leviim also? That's what we're saying, a non-Kayan, because the Leviim are Shluchim of the Bnei Yisrael. How could you think so? Rashi already said, as we brought before, that Mikabolov, and he learns from a Posik in Chumash, that Mikabolov Eilach Mitzvah Skune, from the Kabbalah Saddam, that's where the Kayan's Aveda start. His Mchuyev must be through a Kayan. So if already there it says that the Kabbalah and the rest of the Aveda after the Kabbalah Saddam must be through a Kayan, so by the time we get to this Parsha here, we know already that no one else could do it. So why would we say that the coming to this Parsha, we still wouldn't know? We would think that the other Leviim could do it. And there's a new position given to the Kayanim to make sure they don't do it. Why would you think so? If Rashi already learned from another Pasuk that from Kabbalah Saddam starts the Aved of the Kayanim. So the Rebbe says it's not a kasha. For a modern Pasuk, Pirish Rashi steht by Ela, that Pasuk, and Rashi explaining that from Kabbalah Saddam and on is what must be done through the Kayanim. By the andere Kabbalas verstehen in Noam Sefer Vayikra. It's by Ela. That's talking about Korban Ela, and the other Kabbalas that it talks about in Sefer Vayikra. So there we know already from before that from Kabbalah Saddam, anything from there, only a Kayan could do, no one else. Oh, when it comes to the Korban Pesach, that's where we would think. And that we wouldn't know. Nazayach for Meiser Beheme, you have to take off every time Beheme, you have to give Meiser, make it in the Korban, as the same thing as the Korban Pesach, as we say every morning in davening. So there we wouldn't know, because there it doesn't talk about it in Parsha Chumash Vayikra. We don't know that these also the Pesach and something similar has to be done only through Kayanim. So now comes a new thing here. When after the Torah says that Leviim are in place of the Bnei Yisrael, so I would think that maybe the things that the Bnei Yisrael were able to do, so now the Leviim could do it too, and it's not after the Kayanim. But what they come to tell you, they gave him a new appointment that they have to be careful, even by Korban Pesach, even though it doesn't say a Korban Pesach, but it says here everything, which means to include anything that you didn't know about before, now you know. And that's the Korban Pesach. The Erof and then Avodas Hashem, the lesson in Avodas Hashem is like this. Now this came out at a time when the Rebbe talked a lot about me, Yehudi, and about the idea that they accept Geirim Shalei Halacha, converts which are not in this Geirim Halacha, and they accept it into Klal Yisrael and Yisrael with the law of return, me, Yehudi. So that's why a lot of sikhs from that time has heroes which are connected to the idea not to mix the goyim with the Yidden. And if a goy is a goy, let him be a goy. So the Rebbe brings a lesson from here. If we see such a big difference amongst Yidden itself in different categories of Yidden, really it says on all the Yidden, before Matan Torah, David just said, you all will be to me a nation of Kayanim. So Be'emes, every Yid is a Kayan. Nevertheless, there are Kayanim and there are non-Kayanim. Even though essentially everyone is a Kayan. And still, there is a big difference in the categories of Yidden. As afila zelcha avedet zevelcha de bnei Yisrael mashayches, and even these avedas, that all the Yidden have a connection. It's there. It's like Rashi says that all the Yidden really have to do the tzorchei hamikdash, the needs for the mikdash. So every Yid has a shayches. But you can't everyone do it, so you made the Leviim in their stead. So even things which are shaykh, they're shayches too. Von deswegen is do if they atzivui chomer ba'azora korav yumas. There's a commandment, a very strict one. If a non-Kayan gets close to it, will die. Nicht nur was das bringt and nicht can taste his kedusha. If a non-Kayan tries to go bring a korban, not only it will not add any kedusha, nor verkehrt, the opposite, das bringt Rachmana litzlan zum inyan hahede von seinen Etzem Metzies. it makes him lose his existence. You must. And we're talking about going to do a Dover Shebektusha. But if it's not, there's a big mechitza between Kehanim and non-Kehanim. Allah is kama v'kama. Certainly when it's retzich wegen der mechitza v'avdolah ben Yisrael Lam, we're talking about the separation between Yidden and Goyim. As when we will ma'arav sein say, nicht durch Giruk Aloch, if you want to mix them, not through B'Megayik Aloch, because if you Megayik Aloch, it's not mixing, they're Yidden. If they're Yidden, they belong there. But you're trying to mix them without doing Giruk Aloch, which is an emes Zohar. This is really, really a stranger to us. Eine von zwischen the Amim, one of the nations. And you see in the order of 26 star, the Rebbe says even the best goy is called a Zor l'gabayid. He's using the words, the same words we're saying here by a non-Kohen is called a Zor. And he can't get involved in things which are not for him. So the same thing by Goyim we found. He quotes a pasuk in Yeshaya where it says, "V'omdu zorim v'ro tzeinam," that the Goyim in the future were going to be our workers and they'll take our sheep. So it says zorim. So certainly when we're talking about such zorim, to mix them in Am Yisrael, in amongst Yidden, mit dem Cheshbon, as is stuck, as a sakonik deila for Yidden. You might make a Cheshbon. Take for Yidden, it's not good if you get the Goy mixed in. Oh, but the far wird in Torah Tevin Anitin. We're going to do like a favor to the Goy. We'll have a Goy come to us. We'll do him a favor. So the Rebbe says, it's punkt der Heper, it's the opposite. Das is for him a has a godel. This is for him a big danger, a big damage. He becomes a stumbling block for everyone else. It's not good for him to cause damage to others, and he'll cause damage. Imagine he gets involved in Klal Yisrael and he gets married in Klal Yisrael. He's causing damage to the Yidden. And you know what that brings? Just like by the case of the Kenim there, it says, if a Zor comes, you must. So this could bring him, be so hateful was I'm Metzias. It'll bring to against his Metzias. Only if you don't touch what Hashem, the creator of the world and the giver of the Torah, he made. The Mamavdil ben Yisrael, and to make a separation between Yidden and Goyim. So only if you keep that and you don't do anything to don't ruin that, the Grechtman from Emes and Sholem, you reach the main Sholem, because they tell you have to make Sholem, Yidden and Goyim, so then it'll be the Rev Sholem. And V'teiv Ve'elam, with the greatest peace and the greatest good, for Allah Boya Elam, for all the people. And the Rebbe says in order 29, when it says Boya Elam, it means Kelil Gam Umas Elam. It also includes the Goyim. It'll be good for the Goyim also. So it's not good for the Yidden and not even good for the Goyim. So from here, the lesson is that just like it says here that you shouldn't mix Kehanim and not, certainly you shouldn't mix Yidden and Goyim if they're not Gir K'Halacha. Good.
Shkoyach.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi Thomas.
Okay, everyone should have a good Shabbos and a good Yontev and a Kabbalah Satire, Besimcha, Bepnimius.
Amen.
Amen. You too.
Good job.
Amen.